The most recent officer on trial was acquitted, and by most accounts, this officer was the most culpable in death of Freddie Grey. Colin, what do you think this verdict means for the rest of the officers that still have to be tried?
I think each one of these trials has to be seen on the merits of each one of the trials. And I think that there was a huge mistake that was made at the beginning of this entire process by the media to jump to a great many conclusions, and not just the media, but the Baltimore City government. In a rush or in an effort to appease the population that was rioting, they jumped to conclusions. Now, did things...
I will get justice for these youth.
Did things happen during the arrest that were unconscionable, that were not according to the policies of the Baltimore Police Department, that did not follow the rules of conduct? Absolutely. Were they criminal? Therein lies the core of these trials.
Okay, let me stop right there. What's the most important thing in a trial?
The evidence.
The grand jury's recommendation whether to go forward or not. Why did a local grand jury, what was the grand jury told that caused them to bring an indictment on those officers?
Well, some say
when
that
will
it was,
that be released to the public of what was said? That's where it starts.
Some say one of the big differences between the grand jury and the trial was the fact that it was brought out in the trial that this driver went back and checked on this guy a couple times. That doesn't indicate that he really wants him dead, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, we've talked about this during the last trial. I mean, yes, the Baltimore's, you know, it's unconscionable perhaps that Baltimore City did not have a rule saying that a prisoner who's shackled in a transport van was not to be seatbelted before. And there was a new policy for them. Maybe didn't follow it. It was, you know, several weeks after the fact or whatever the case was. There is a difference between negligence and criminal misconduct. And I think that's what's coming out during these trials.
Well, it's interesting because clearly he was the one that everybody expected was the most culpable, as you said in the...
Yeah, this was the driver,
right? So it's interesting, though, the four remaining defendants have each filed motions
To dismiss.
Based on the fact that, hey, wait a minute, guys, come on, here we go.
I mean, if
and
you can't
the
find
other
the
problem
driver
is,
guilty.
you know, the negligence piece, and you may be right, Colin, there may have been negligence, but this prosecutor so overcharged this case that there's no way that if there was justice to be done, it's ever going to be done.
No, it's not going to be done because they turned this into a political trial. They turned it into a witch hunt, as opposed to actually wanting to. And you're absolutely right, Ron. The grand jury instructions that are given lay basically the entire case before them.
Was there anybody given instructions to read that wasn't their own thought? That's
likely not.
Well, I think you're going to find out that that'll come out, that somebody was given things to read that was written by someone else, and it didn't come from the person that gave the testimony before the grand jury.
And that's very possible. This is Baltimore, so nothing would surprise me about the way the justice system works.
Even worse than Chicago?
No.
It's our own little Chicago.
Yeah,
we haven't had dailies in office in Baltimore for, you know, last however long, but...
But this Marilyn Mosby woman, she, in my mind, her behavior is almost criminal.
It is. And very insightful during the actual riots and everything that happened following the whole Freddie Grey event. And to be honest, I think somewhat inefficient.
Absolutely. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with this. But I got to tell you, I would be very surprised if any of the remaining four officers actually come away with any criminal prosecutions.
Didn't it?
Just my opinion.
Didn't it kind of please everybody to see the other night after the verdict came out that there was peace and quiet?
Yes.
You know, that's a very good point, Ron.
Yes, I was very glad to see that.
Yeah, I think the citizens of Baltimore were respectful, and I think maybe they understand a lot.
Well, and I think what's happened is there has been a lot of focus on this case. And if the facts are being presented truthfully, if you have a justice system that is working correctly and is making a just decision based on the evidence that's being presented, and I think most rational people are going to accept justice. That's the way the system is supposed to work. So everything after the entire incident and the riots and everything happened, and after the indictment, has worked correctly. We haven't hung these people out to dry because, for a political case or anything else. The justice system itself has worked as it was meant to.
Yeah.
There was, if any of you remember the movie My Cousin Vinny.
Oh, yes.
There was a moment in the movie where Joe Pesci, who was playing the lawyer for the defense, essentially proved his point that these guys couldn't have done it. And he goes up to the witness that was saying they did do it, and he said, "So what do you think? Is there any way they could have done this?" And the guy pauses for a minute, and Joe Pesci says, "Come on, you can say it. They know." Same thing's going on here. Everybody knows.
Right.
These defendants know. They filed these motions. Legal observers, if you look at various legal observers in the media, they're saying the prosecution doesn't have a path forward on this. So the question is, are they going to step up and say, "Yep"?
Well, don't forget, they have to be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right. And that's, I don't think that's
And
possible.
there is reasonable doubt.
Yeah, you bring up My Cousin Vinny, and it was about a vehicle.
Yeah.
Whether it had an equal lock differential, it couldn't have,
Exactly,
you know.
exactly.
So there was a whole lot of things on the vehicle, but you had to know the facts.
You had to
and
know the
exactly
facts.
how they were viewed.
And now we are learning the facts. We are learning that the driver went back and checked on this guy.
Right.
We are learning all kinds of things that really, in my mind, and I'm not a legal observer, and I'm certainly no legal mind, but I don't see a path forward.
Well, and I think, it illustrates something, which is that justice is a lot more complex. Yes, we have a guy who admittedly had a rather checkered past, who probably was not, probably did need to be stopped for whatever he was stopped for. So I don't think there's a whole lot of question about the legitimacy of the arrest. That nevertheless, we have a due process for a reason, was put in the back of a paddy wagon, and whether he was injured during the arrest or injured during the intervening transport time, ended up with a broken neck by the time they got to the city jail.
One of the things we have...
So that's, but let me
Go
finish.
ahead.
So that there's something wrong there. Does that, however, people will look at that and automatically assume it's a crime. And I think that's what it's illustrating here, that yes, the actual event may be regrettable, but it's not necessarily the result of criminal behavior.
And one of the things the judge said in his opinion, during his opinion, was that Freddie Grey had a personal responsibility, and we all have a personal responsibility. If you're getting stopped, you don't run away. You stop, because guess what? Otherwise, it's not going to end well. Now, I know this wasn't about him running away. It was in the back of a paddy wagon. But Freddie Grey, I agree with the judge, had a personal responsibility.
But, and something I do think that is kind of sad, too, is, this is another case where justice isn't black and white, justice is green, okay? In that, you know why they were found not guilty? Because they had a great attorney, all right?
I'd like to think it's a little more than
Well,
that.
it's a little more than that. But if, let's say something similar happens to you and I, and we can't afford an attorney for some sort of similar charges. Of course, we can be charged with that. But, I mean, if we can't afford a good attorney, we have to go with a public defender. You're going to get what you pay for when it comes to
pretty much
Yeah, I don't
SOL
know that
at
I
that
agree
point.
with that.
Yes.
Yeah. I think
Go
that-
to the OJ trial. What happened on the
well,
first trial?
I think that,
Exactly.
but I don't want to disparage the public defenders that spend their life.
Well, it's not disparaging the public defenders. The reality of the matter is, if you look at these poor people, they have a caseload that is,
Right.
several feet thick. They just don't have the time to focus.
Right.
It's not that they're bad lawyers that they don't care. They just don't have the bandwidth.
So.
All right. I think we've shot that one to death.
Up next, it's Fast Five. 4 panelists, 5 topics. Stay with us here on the Flipside.